Good afternoon, everyone. Today is February 7th, 2025. I'm Dr. Small, Director of Professional Development. We welcome you to today's, we welcome you to today's Department of Health's Developmental Disabilities Administration's Community Meeting Series with Deputy Secretary Marlena Hutchinson. On the panel today, we have Deputy Secretary Marlena Hutchinson, Robert White, Chief Operating Officer, Rhonda Workman, Director of Federal Programs, and Will Payne, Chief of Staff. Before we begin our meeting, we also want to ensure civility for all meetings. This free expression of diverse viewpoints is essential. An essential value for our group. This freedom comes with the responsibility to engage respectfully, which involves treating one another with dignity and respect in good faith. Uncivil behavior, disruptive conduct, abusive language, threats, or harassment will not be tolerated and may lead to being excused from the meeting. Thank you for helping us to keep this productive and comfortable for everyone. Closed captioning is available during the meeting. Please click the closed captioning option in the taskbar to start closed captioning. All attendees are in a listen-only mode, and your mic and camera are currently turned off. During the meeting, if you wish to participate in the public comment period, please use the question box. To speak on a topic, put the title of the slide followed by your name in the question box. For example, you could enter IFDGS John Doe. You will then be invited to comment on each slide in the order that your name is received. You will be invited to unmute your microphone once it's your turn. And I'd like to turn this over to Deputy Secretary Marlena Hutchinson. Good afternoon, Marlena.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Dr. Smalls. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this week's community meeting to talk about DDA service delivery system. Want to extend the greatest appreciation for having you all here with us this afternoon. As we talk about DDA service delivery system, want to also give you an opportunity to speak with us and share your feedback about DDA's proposed budget. The Moore-Miller administration continues to make record investments in the DDA. As you all know, this year's proposed budget includes more than $1.3 billion in general funds, and that's actually 2/3 higher than the funding that DDA actually received 3 years ago. With these investments, the funding will help support new enrollments. It will help us enable LTSS Maryland improvements, enable a moderate rate increase, and also maximize sustainable funding for our service delivery system. Next slide. With these investments, the DDA service delivery system must be sustainable. So we need to make certain that we are driving outcomes. We develop a sustainable system of funding, and we also do this without major impact to participants' lives. Next slide, please. So with this, we want to give you all an opportunity to share your feedback in regard to the DDA's proposed cost containment strategies. The first cost containment strategy is around the elimination of the geographical rate differential. This would be specific to the 5 jurisdictions within Maryland: Calvert County, Prince George's County, Montgomery County, Frederick County, and Charles County. And the reason for this proposal is for us to preserve, promote, and maximize funding for DDA community services. At this time, I'm going to turn the controls over to my team so that we can solicit community feedback on this specific proposal. Dr. Smalls?
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Will Payne. Just as a reminder to participate in the public comment, please enter the topic at the top of the slide and your name in the question box. And we'll call on you in the order that those comments are received. So again, just the topic at the top of the slide. For this slide, it would be geographic differential followed by your name. And then we'll call on you in the order that those comments appear. The first person is Brooke Whiteside.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So my question is, will that affect staff's current rates? Will we have to be decreasing staff's rates if they're above whatever is going to be set?
Hello, Brooke. The elimination of the geographical differential will not impact the reasonable and customary rates that you currently pay to your staff. What will be impacted would be the actual budgets of the participants who are self-directing their services who live in the GeoDiff counties.
Okay, so DDA isn't saying you're paying outside of the reasonable and customary rate because you had an approved wage exception form. We're not making you get rid of that rate, but you might have to if your budget.
So what we are saying related to this particular cost containment strategy is it does not impact what the pay rate of your employees. Further along, you'll see some additional cost containment strategies that are unique to the self-directed services model. And we'll talk about those when we get to those slides.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Our next person is Scott Thigpen.
Thank you for taking the question. This may be, if I understand, we're going to be given a budget based on the number of hours we're allocated. But is anybody, if I guess I don't understand the answer to the question because there is currently a wage differential based on the four counties mentioned that's in the current plan that's being eliminated, but it's not changing the allowable rate per hour we can pay in Montgomery County. It seems like those things are contradictory.
So there currently is not a wage differential for these five counties. What you may be referring to is the current provider rates. So if you're self-directing your services and you choose a DDA provider, and that provider lives in one, and you live in one of these five counties, then your provider currently gets a differential. With this proposal, the provider would no longer get the differential, but would get the same rate that all of the other providers get throughout the state.
Okay,
Okay, I think I'd have to see it on paper. Is this going to be provided in a formal submission later in this presentation about how this would work? It's very hard to envision what this is going to look like based on what you're saying. So that's not a question, that's more of a request, and I'll mute my mic.
okay, Our next person in the question box is Paulette Roseborough.
Yes. All right. Good afternoon. I'm sticking to the same question, but I think I am understanding the difference. The geographic differential is pertaining to the providers, and the exception maximum is pertaining to self-direction, which you're going to talk about later in this presentation. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next person in the question box is Samantha Snow.
Hi, my question is, can you please provide more detail on the glide path for eliminating the geographic differential rate that was mentioned by the Deputy Secretary at the Budget and Taxation hearing?
Sure. We are still working on the specific details. One of the reasons why we are convening this meeting today is to also get your feedback on what a glide path would look like for the department to take into consideration. Do you have any proposed recommendations in that regard?
Not at this time.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next person in the question box is Denise Miller.
Yes, I'm going to defer my question to when you're talking about self-directed services. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Denise. The next person in the question box is Matthew Deal.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. My concern is that eliminating the geographical differential would not be a fair change, as those counties have to compete against higher minimum wages, regardless of the agreed upon base pay for employees. How do we ensure there's no geographical advantage with this change?
Oh, thank you for your question. Ed, I don't know if you're aware of the BRIC method, but the BRIC method is driven by a wage that we get from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and the lowest BLS wage used in the BRIC method to establish the rates for providers is above what the state minimum wage, as well as the minimum wage in Montgomery County. Also, the BRIC method is a data-informed process that uses cost data provided by the providers, and that information is used to calculate the different cost components of the rate that leads to the fully funded rate.
Okay, thank you. Our next person in line is Julie Ryan Silva.
Hello, I have a comment, not a specific question, but just want to raise the concern that this will make it more difficult than it already is to retain quality support staff in these high cost of living areas, and just want to make sure that there is equity taking into account these high cost of living areas.
Thank you so much for that feedback, Julie.
Okay, to ensure that we have enough time for comment on all of the cost containment related topics, we're going to go ahead and go to the next slide. Just as a reminder to everyone to participate in the public comment, please put in the title at the top of the slide, followed by your name. And I'll turn it back over to Deputy Secretary Hutchinson to discuss this proposal.
The next proposal is in regard to dedicated hours. The department is seeking to update its policy for dedicated hours to promote participant choice and self-determination, as well as to support their health and welfare while maximizing funding for our service delivery system. Again, with this one, we're interested in hearing your feedback and any approaches to implementation. Will?
Okay, our first person is Lynn Wilkinson.
Hello, thank you for taking my call. I'm presuming that this dedicated hours slide is in relation to the proposal to remove dedicated hours above or with the shared hours combination. And you can correct me if I'm not speaking on this correctly. If this is the same one, this change would be a dramatic cut to our budget where the supports that we provide would be significantly impacted. Furthermore, this would be nearly impossible to implement with our staff and team members on a daily basis would not know if all shared hours for a week would be utilized. So putting this into operation would be very difficult on our end. That's it. Thank you.
Lynn, thank you so much for that feedback. I do want to let everyone know that we are not eliminating dedicated hours. If a participant has the assessed need for dedicated hours, those hours will be granted. So thank you for that feedback. If you have any suggestions in regard to how the policy can be updated, please do not hesitate to email us. We'll also have additional meetings in this regard to talk through the suggestions and your feedback. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Okay, our next person is Elizabeth Henn.
Hi. I'm not really sure I understand what dedicated hours are. Is that what sort of I think of as one-on-one?
It's, again, based on the participant's assessed needs, so it would be 1-to-1 or 2-to-1, based on the participant's assessed need.
And it is unique to the traditional community services.
Services that are provided by our community providers.
Okay. Does that apply to services provided in a residential setting?
Yes.
Okay. And if a person is getting dedicated hours, is there assuming that the need has been established in the past, is there a possibility those dedicated hours would disappear?
No, again, for this proposal, if an individual needs dedicated hours, the individual will receive those dedicated hours. The assessment happens during the person-centered planning process. So we are not eliminating dedicated hours. Participants who need them will continue to receive them.
So I'm not sure what the change is.
The change is for those situations where the shared hours within that home can be maximized when needed.
Okay.
Again, we
Thank you.
are totally open to any suggestions for the policy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next person in the queue is Jessica Gallatin, sorry.
All right, I think I'm unmuted. Sorry, I had a couple of questions. I don't know if it's super specific to dedicated hours, but if I'm understanding you correctly, I thought that all of the participants' person-centered plans were already based on assessed need. And so I'm not exactly sure where all of these cuts are coming from when it's already been determined that these participants have an assessed need for them. And additionally, I just wanted to ask the question on what the administration is doing in defense of these cuts, because so far it seems like there's a lot of support for Governor Moore's proposal, and we would hope that the administrators here at DDA are going to fight for these participants and what they need. Our policies have always been outlined to address people's assessed needs. Am I wrong?
No, you are not wrong. The person-centered planning process is in accordance with an individual's assessed need, which is why the dedicated hours are not going away. We actually support our governor, and so this is the governor's proposed budget. And so we're here to have the conversation with you all to understand what the impacts will be, and if you have any suggestions in regard to the implementation, the approach for implementation.
Okay, certainly. Yeah, I've signed up for all of your councils. I haven't been accepted to any of them. I have a lot of suggestions, but we can discuss that further, not on a 2-minute time limit.
Thank you, Ms. Gallatin.
Okay, our next person, and we'll probably need to move ahead after this person, is Cindy Freeman.
Hi, everyone. I think you've explained now that you're not talking about eliminating dedicated hours. So, but I would like to add that even though we, of course, are hoping you do not continue to have policies that make it very difficult to prove that we have people with behaviors and medical needs, that we need to maintain those, or it does make a disincentive, to providers to admit these people. We also have residents that just need some special time to, go to different activities they want to go to by themselves. And they would not have choice if we did not have, enough hours for the staff to do that. So I hope there's going to be more consideration in the future for individualized, eligibility for different situations, because, the self-directed model does allow for people to go, into one-on-one supports all the time. So we aren't able to give the same choice if we don't have the same, rules. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Freeman, and I am taking copious notes there. Again, we certainly welcome any suggestions in regard to the policy for us to take into consideration. That is very helpful feedback. Thank you.
All right, if we could go ahead to the next slide, please.
Can we go back one slide, please? So this proposal is in regard to state-funded services. This is going to give individuals who are receiving DD services by way of 100% general funds an opportunity to apply for the waiver program. This will help us maximize our state or federal match so that we can continue to fund and sustain our service delivery system. Again, open to any feedback and approaches to implementation. Will?
So far, no names in the chat. So again, just mention the name of the topic and then your name. Okay, the first person is Gail Godwin.
Thank you. We support one person who has historically not been able to prove waiver eligibility. What does happen to she's just one example, I would imagine, what happens with people like her? Will they be kicked out of their service? Will DDA continue to serve until? What are the plans for people like her? Thank you.
For individuals in these extenuating circumstances, we welcome any suggestions for consideration. Do you have any suggestions for us to take into consideration?
Well, the suggestion would be that there would need to be a waiver, there would need to be an exception for people who don't fall into that category. So that would be my suggestion.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next person is Henry Damask or Damsk. Sorry for mispronouncing your surname.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, great. Hey, 2 weeks ago, there was an article in the Baltimore Sun, and the items mentioned in the article was that SDS program, and I thought it was covered under the waiver program, Medicaid, could potentially go away. Is that true, or is that false?
So for a point of clarification, and I think you were breaking up a bit, you are asking if self-direction services are going to go away based on an article you read in the newspaper?
Yes, in the Baltimore Sun, I think it was last Saturday, but the Saturday before. That was my understanding on the table that could go away, and I assume it's covered under the Medicaid waiver program.
You're absolutely correct. So that is erroneous information. The self-directed services delivery model is one of two service delivery models within our 3 Medicaid waiver programs, to your point. The department is not pursuing in any way taking away self-direction as a service delivery model. So that was erroneous information, and I hate that you were put under that impression. Self-direction is a service delivery model within our approved Medicaid waiver programs, and the department is not seeking to terminate self-direction or that service delivery model.
And real quick, since your attention, we live in Carroll County and we have an enhanced rate because our son's need I was understanding from our social advisor that that would be honored again for the new year if you had it last year. Is that true, or is that based upon the personnel center input?
Okay, so each year, each individual goes through the person-centered planning process as a part of redetermination, and so the assessed needs are determined each year.
Okay, assuming everything stays the same, is it a good assumption that that won't change under these times of budget cuts?
I cannot promise you that assumption because I don't know the participants' unique circumstances. I do have to table this. If you wouldn't mind weighing in when we get to self-direction, we still need to get through this the state-funded services piece, please.
Okay, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, our next person is Connie Bailey, and we'll likely need to move to the next topic after this person.
Hi. I think I figured out the answer to my question. I was going to ask how we know whether we are funded through general funds or through the waiver. But I think it's on our paperwork that we applied for a waiver and that, so then our funding is from the waiver program, correct?
Correct. So your person-centered plan, as well as your case manager, if you are participating in a Medicaid waiver program operated by the DDA, those services are covered by way of the Medicaid waiver program.
Okay, let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please.
So the next topic is in regard to the low intensity support services program. The department's proposal is to suspend this program because it is subject to the availability of state funds. That means that this program is supported by 100% federal state funds, as there is not a federal match. So again, we're interested in hearing your feedback about this proposal and any recommendations for implementation.
Okay, the first person is Yanina Fair.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Yanina Fair. My son Bradley has received list funding in the past. I'd like to share my story with you, and I'd also like to get the email contact information for this group so that I can share my story further. Liz has been an absolute lifeline for my family. My son started receiving special education services via Montgomery County. He had a very rare neurological disability which affected his ability to speak. He was not able to produce any sound at all. Almost until he was about 5 years old. We've had specialty speech therapists, etc. The program is an absolute lifeline. It also teaches children that are nonverbal or mute how to swim. It allows them to attend camp and get community integration and socialization support in the community. It is an absolute lifeline to so many families, including my own. I'd love to get your email contact information to share my story further. Please do not cut Liz. It is a lifeline.
Thank you so much for your feedback, Ms. Fair. And we will get an email address out to everyone to share your feedback, questions, concerns, or approaches to implementation in writing after this meeting.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so much.
much.
Okay, thank you. Our next person is Jess Gallatin.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I had a question about the LIST program. I'm not sure if I understand correctly what you mean by suspend the program versus eliminating the program. And I think there's a couple of questions with regard to this in the BRFA. There's always been that provision that this program could run when there was state funds available. I'm not sure what has changed. Are you proposing that this program will be eliminated with the BRFA, or is it just going to be suspended for fiscal year 25, fiscal year 26 until funds become available again, or do you plan on just completely eliminating it?
So to your point, the program is subject to the availability of general funds, those 100% general funds. Do you have a recommendation either way for the department to take into consideration?
Well, I had already thought that the program was supported by funds that would have been available in any fiscal budget. So when the funds weren't available, these are like single one-time grant situations. So it's not something that's ongoing already. But I think what is being proposed is to eliminate the program in its entirety. Is that correct?
That is in the governor's proposed budget. Again, we are here to hear any feedback and any suggestions in regard to the proposal.
Okay, so is there the possibility to make the suggestion that the program just be suspended until funds become available in the future? That way we don't have to go through the process of trying to reinstitute a program that already has shown benefits to Marylanders?
Yes, this is the platform to provide that feedback, and I am taking copious notes right now and have jotted down your suggestion. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next person is the initials JA, and we'll need to move to the next topic after this person.
Thank you for unmuting me. I'd like to add my voice to others in support of this program. I have two kids with disabilities, and both have benefited enormously from this program in the past when they received grants to either take horseback riding or attend camp. It really allowed us to take them out into the community and help them acquire skills. I would suggest maybe reducing the amounts right now and keeping the program somewhat active on the books, but without completely eliminating it, because a lot of us are so impoverished by the situation that we're in, where one parent may not be able to work, or they don't have enough money to provide all the things that their kids need, and they may prioritize medical issues over other things that would benefit them socially and emotionally. So I just urge you to be kind to that program. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your feedback.
Okay, let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please.
The next slide is in regard to reasonable and customary rates. The proposal is to have these rates aligned with the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the methodology that is used for our traditional community providers. So the department is seeking to update these rates for individuals who self-direct their services based on the Bureau of Labor Statistics information for the state of Maryland to align with the methodology that is used for our community providers. Again, we are open to hear any feedback and approaches to implementation.
Okay, our first person is Paulette Roseborough.
All right, thank you. I just want to make the comment that the Bureau of Labor Statistics BLS rates are based on skills and experiences for staff that are required by the provider employers. BLS rates are a base level rate, and there is not a method for BLS to capture the information about rates being paid in the self-directed community. The self-directed DSPs are required by their job descriptions to have more skills and experiences than that generally required by providers, as well as to provide services and supports at a much higher and more intense level. For example, DSPs in particular have to really search and look in the community for services and activities after looking at the PCP and evaluating the desires and wishes of their participant, as well as the challenges that the participant may have. My suggestion would be that you consider the BLS rates as a baseline, and that self-directed or anyone would then use the job descriptions and the requirements of the job and the needs of the participant to then determine why the salary levels would be higher. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that feedback, Ms. Rosebear.
Okay, our next person is John Leon.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. First of all, thank you for what you do for all of our families. It's greatly appreciated. I want to say that I did look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics for what I believe to be the comparable to personal support, and the rates look to be half of the current rates from DDA. As a matter of fact, that half looks like it is equivalent to the minimum wage in the state of Maryland. So here's my concern. My concern is that probably most of the families in self-directed that have personal supports will lose their personal supports to other jobs because these rates are going to be equivalent to the minimum wage in the state of Maryland. I'm very concerned about that. Thank you for taking my question.
Thank you for that very helpful feedback, Mr. Leon.
Okay, as we are approaching the last quarter of our meeting and have a few topics remaining, we'd like to go ahead and go to the next topic.
The next topic is in regard to wage exceptions. The department's proposal is to eliminate this process for participants who self-direct their services, again, based on the Bureau of Labor Statistics information for the state of Maryland, to align with the methodology used for traditional our community providers. So again, open to your feedback and any approaches or recommendations to implementation. Will?
Our first person is Ashley Johnson.
Thank you for selecting my name. So the first thing that I did hear at the beginning of this is that I've heard you all from DDA say you are in support of all of the cuts that Governor Moore is proposing. So that, of course, sets the tone, in my opinion, for how we should be understanding what's going to go forward as far as any kind of feedback that we provide. I'm speaking both as a mother of a child who is, or adult at this point, that's in self-directed, but also as a provider with DDA. And the amount of families and clients that I come into contact with that are using both traditional and self-directed services. My significant concern is that a lot of these proposed budget cuts are definitely going to lead to these DSPs where we're already experiencing a shortage leaving the profession. And what is the governor then proposing for the outcome of that? Because I can say for me personally, I haven't worked a traditional job since 2021, where I was a taxpayer and all of those things that would, in my opinion, benefit the state of Maryland. I made a pretty good salary before. And that doesn't make sense to me that we're going to force these families to be in these kinds of positions where they cannot work, they cannot provide for themselves, they cannot spend their own personal money on things, which means that these people are going to be relying on Medicaid and public services for basic needs. Like my son's on my health insurance, for example, Medicaid rarely pays for claims as a result. And so when you're putting us in this position, what is the governor planning to do? Because that's going to be the inevitable. That's not a question, it's going to be when it happens.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson, for your feedback. I do want to say that we support our governor and we also support the proposed budget, which also includes record investments into our service delivery system, as I mentioned at the beginning of this call. Understanding that we have an unsustainable system, the investments will help us support maintaining what we have and also supporting additional enrollment. And we have to look at the service delivery model at large, at whole, to bring things into a sustainable system. So I really appreciate the feedback. And if you have any suggestions in regard to the implementation with this specific proposal, we are certainly open to hear that as well. Thank you so much.
That's appreciated. Is there a specific email that I should be sending it to? Because I'll be completely honest, Ms. Hutchinson, I regularly try to communicate with various DDA staff and I don't get responses.
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, we will share a dedicated email address for all of the participants on this call to share your feedback.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, our next person is Seitel Twigger.
Hi, my son is a 7-year-old. He has a severe pain disorder and is nonverbal and engages in high magnitude self-injurious behavior when in pain. Before receiving DDA services, he was indefinitely hospitalized in 4-point restraints night and day where he was overdosed and nearly killed twice. He also suffered pressure ulcers, broke a window with his head, and bled in nurses' eyes. We currently receive 2-to-1 staffing at an enhanced rate. Even still, it is challenging to maintain staffing. We have finally found staff who, when retained after tremendous turnover, If you cut their pay, they will leave, and we will be unable to staff our son. My husband, who is an aerospace engineer through Northrop Grumman, who the state of Maryland directly has paid and tried to contribute to bringing in more engineers, will lose his job, and my son will lose his insurance and his pain management specialist. His behaviors will become even more worse, and because of that, he will be rehospitalized and likely die in 4-point restraints while being tortured in a hospital. I suggest, my primary suggestion is that you make exceptions for families like mine so that and retain the wage exception. And if you do not, my suggestion is that you pay for the funeral expenses and grief counseling for my other children when my child is tortured and killed in hospitals.
Thank you for your feedback.
We now have about 8 minutes remaining and 2 additional topics. So we'd like to go ahead to the next slide, please.
The next proposal is in regard to individual and family directed goods and services. The proposal is to reinstate the individual and family directed goods and services cap of $5,000 for goods and services. Again, we are open to your feedback and any recommendations or approaches to implementation. Will?
Our first person is Kim Schofield.
Thank you. Hi, and it's Kim Schofield. So my question regarding the goods and services section is primarily to the topic of personal accounts, personal funds. I know that we're protected with our ABLE account and our special needs trusts, but what is unclear is that the personal funds are stating from your offices that it's any funds directly in that person's name. Many of us, including other families, receive Social Security benefits directly deposited into a checking account only for the use of Social Security insurance to be deposited. It is still considered a federal fund, even if it's deposited into a bank account. So how is DDA, with the self-directed model, able to request that that family show that there's any type of balance when they're looking for approval for goods and services to be paid for?
Thank you, Ms. Cofield, for sharing your comment with us. I would say that the goods and services, as required by CMS, requires us to ensure no other resources. And so we also ask in the policy and manual that you would share expenditures and costs so that we could look at that from that perspective. We are absolutely interested in your comments, so we've taken that note, and also interested if you had any thoughts about the reinstatement of the cap for individual and family goods and services.
Yes, regarding the cap, I mean, a lot of individuals, 5,000 seems like a lot when it's just looking at the number, but when you look at all the varied services that could be obtained through this section, $5,000 is not going to go very far. I think there needs to be, like the previous lady spoke about something else, there needs to be situations where it should be considered to be paid for in a different method. But again, the cap, I think, is going to be putting a lot of strain on us, but also the fact of wanting to look at our resources and what funding these families have. Personal checking accounts like SSI accounts should not be considered and looked at because it is a federally protected account.
Thank you. Okay, our next person is Stacy Colwell.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, yes. First I want to say that it is an egregious act that slides that are provider only topics have been given much more time for questions than slides that apply to all of your constituents. And I also want to know, how is DDA functioning as a non-political service if it is fully supporting the governor's proposal despite constituent feedback? Specifically, there is questions about list funding, wage exceptions. All of these things are not being addressed in the IFDGS as well. You have shut down feedback opportunity by shortening them so much after dragging out provider things. And how are we not being set apart as problem children, basically.
Thank you for your feedback, Ms. Colwell. The DDA will be hosting additional community meetings to provide additional opportunities for feedback.
Well, my timer went away. But I'm asking, how is it that you are justifying looking at bank accounts? On what authority are you doing that for if we're already qualified for the waiver, then we're obviously already poor. So where are you guys getting the authority to?
So within our waiver authority, we have the authority to request that information. As Ms. Workman indicated, the participant must demonstrate that there is not an amount of excessive funds that the DDA takes into consideration. So by way of our waiver authority, we have the authority to look at these things. And again, just to answer your second question in regard to feedback, we will be providing additional opportunities to have these community meetings for feedback. Thank you.
Let's go ahead to the next slide, please.
The next slide is in regard to the wait list equity fund. The DDA is proposing utilizing this fund to preserve, promote, and maximize funding for DDA community services. We are open to any feedback and recommendations or approaches to implementation.
The first person is Irene Sauda. Apologies if I mispronounced your surname.
All right, good afternoon. So my question about the waiting list equity fund, what is the age right now that I guess qualifies like the caregiver in order to access the waiting list equity? We do work with families who have elderly caregivers and are in desperate need of having these additional services.
Yeah, so Irene, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your question. The waiting list equity fund regulations and statutes allows the use of the fund for different purposes. One of them that we had done historically was to look at the eldest caregivers on the waiting list. We do continue to support people on the waiting list based on the priority category and reserve categories that are authorized in the federal program. What this proposal here is talking about is utilizing those funds to support our community services for people in the program. So we're definitely interested if you have any feedback about using those funds specifically to maximize the funding for community services and any strategies or approaches to implement.
So you're saying that it could possibly be used for other populations other than like the elderly caregivers?
The proposal is to utilize it for community services, so to pay for services for people.
Okay. If I will message on if I think of more specifics. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next person is Jennifer Ricketts.
Hello, thank you for unmuting me. I think my question was answered in the previous round, but I was just wondering if you could have a little bit, maybe for those who don't understand, explain a little bit about what the waiting list equity fund is.
So yeah, that's a great question. Thank you so much for asking that. The waiting list equity fund is created in two ways, or the funds that come from are two ways. One is when an individual leaves a state residential center and goes to the community, if there's a cost savings, right? So their services in the community are less costly than the institutional, then that can create some funds that would go into the waiting list equity. And then in addition, on Maryland taxpayers, when you file your taxes, there's an opportunity for you to select to make a donation to the waiting list equity fund.
Thank you for that.
Okay, our next person is Nina Liakos.
Okay, I finally unmuted myself. I'm not sure which question you want me to ask. I have a lot of questions here, but just the last one, which I was still typing when you called on me, on waiting list equity fund. I'm wondering, the people that are waiting for services, does that mean that they will never come to the end of the line?
We will continue to process new enrollments. It's a part of the investments that the governor has in his proposed budget. Specifically, those individuals who are transitioning youth, individuals who are in crisis, individuals who are in emergency services. So we will continue to process new enrollments as it is a part of our of the governor's proposed budget.
Thank you for that. I have a little bit more time, so back up to the previous question about wage exceptions. I just wanted to point out that part-time staff for self-directed participants generally don't get health insurance, vacation pay, etc. And that is one reason why SDS employers need to pay staff more. And also for some participants, not being able to offer a wage exception will mean that their choice of employees will be confined to employees who are incompetent or inexperienced, but they will accept that wage. It's a great concern for many people in the self-directed community. And thank you for taking my questions and comments.
Thank you so much for that helpful feedback.
This concludes our available time today. Please go ahead to the next slide.
So thank you all for joining us today. We received some very helpful feedback to take into consideration as we went through each of the proposals. As I mentioned a couple of times throughout this presentation, we will provide a dedicated email address for you all to share any additional input, feedback, or any questions that you might have that were not covered in today's webinar. Also, we will be providing another opportunity for us to come together as a community to talk about these proposed strategies. So please be on the lookout in your email for our constant contact for that future meetings invitation. Thank you so much for your time today, your feedback, and please have a great weekend. Take care.